I will say in general, one thing that did disturb me and bothered me about the conference, and I did have an opportunity to sort of say this, in a meeting, was there was very brief hand waving at the upside of AI, and then just constant sort of dread and worry. And actually, the most interesting were like just general CEOs that are just like very pragmatic about how does this impact my business. But
Okay.
particularly on the sort of the public sessions and more on the like the policy questions, everyone was it's all downside focused. What's going to go bad? How do we
It
regulate this?
seems
X
like
Y
that's
Z.
the
Blah blah blah
only
blah blah.
sentiment that's acceptable to express in public at
Yeah,
this point.
and so I at one point I got up. I'm like, everyone's talking about these issues, human rights, inclusion, like all these sorts of pieces. At the end of the day, the way we uplift humanity is through growth. It's the only way, growing the pie, not slicing up in different ways. How do you grow? You grow by increasing productivity. It's the only way to increase wealth. How do you increase productivity? Via technology. Technology could be the wheel, it could be the computer, it could be the car, it could be AI. How do
Mhm.
you invent technology with intelligence? We are on the verge of one of the greatest gifts humanity has ever had, which is a massive increase in intelligence, which, if you care about these human outcomes, has one of the most massive beneficials for human welfare ever in history. And people are just barely waving their hands at this and obsessing about the downsides and are going to kill and destroy one of the greatest gifts we are poised to receive that actually meets the goals you claim to care about. And
Yeah.
that was non-existent. That view was completely non-existent. And that was
Well,
probably the
and I
most.
also just feel like the reasonable, rational position on this and any technology that's as impactful as AI figures to be is that there will be positives and there will be negatives. Like if you went back 40 years, what is the internet going to do to society? Well, there have been some revolutionary benefits and there have been some real drawbacks that have become apparent.
No,
But
go back further. Go back to the Industrial Revolution. Go back to like
right.
the printing press. Like this is just the reality. And at the
It's
end
the
of the day,
reality, but then there's like 90% of the conversation is fixated
yep.
on these fantastical downside scenarios,
Yeah,
and
well,
it
the
just
problem is
seems a
people.
little bit bizarre and irrational.
This goes back to our bit about the sports viewing, right? it's very it's very easy to envision downsides that fit in your current frame of view. It's very hard to imagine new things that were never before possible, right? And that applies massively to AI. The upside, it's like a venture capital investment. Like the downside is capped, the upside is unlimited. Now,
Mhm.
this could get very dour and dark. Like the downside is capped, we might all die. But but like, certainly something to
Downside in any
consider,
conversation,
but the
yep.
upside is uncapped. The number of things that could happen that could be invented by definition are unimaginable to us today. But that doesn't mean they don't exist, and it doesn't mean they can't be killed. And
Mhm.
this happened. I made this sort of mini speech in the same afternoon that Malay speech came on, which I think hit a lot of the same notes, which is like it's very easy to point to the shortcomings of capitalism, XYZ, but let's be honest, the what actually raised people out of poverty was free markets and trade. Like that
Right.
is what actually grew the pie. And I think the technology is fits in the same frame. And it was discouraging and disappointing the extent to which the supposed smartest people in the world, our elites, had such tiny imaginations.
So, would you say, broadly speaking, it was more pessimistic in terms of the next couple of years, or was there some optimism there? I mean, divorcing it from strictly AI, just the general mood.
It just felt like it didn't matter. It felt like these people don't matter. Like they're scurrying around the edges of this sort of force, and to the extent it matters, the only way they can matter is by making things worse. Like
Mm.
passing laws, passing regulations, none of which is going to actually stop any of this stuff. Like people are going to develop this in general. It's like, the class that we talked about in the past, like with gun control, right? Are you actually stopping, who actually follows the laws? Not criminals. That's kind of a big hole in this sort of argument, right? Um, and and I think that you can understand to what, if you want to get into the psychology of folks that are there, the internet and this sort of wave in general is increasingly divorced from the powers that be getting together in a ski town in Switzerland and
Mhm.
dictating what happens to the world. And the power that
Even in
they
the
do
last
have.
5 to 10 years, the view on Davos, it used to be, like, the place to be, and now it's, like, almost universally reviled, on several continents now, so, certainly the power centers are shifting
Yeah, I
around the
mean,
world.
it's an aspect of people shifting attitudes, like, towards the media, for example, right? That used to be the only way to get your word out, and now when it's one of many, there's it just sort of like there's this withdrawal into a particular point of view, and you don't wanna just you don't wanna be like me because you might not
Mhm.
get invited back, or you might lose your job, or you might sort of XYZ, and the reality is I'm an independent actor thanks to the internet, thanks to my subscribers. I'm gonna go out and say what I think and do what I do. And if you don't want to invite me back, that's fine. I don't need you. And that I think applies to technology and AI generally. Google and Facebook don't need to make B2B deals to succeed. They just put their product up on the internet. And that is so fundamentally disruptive. Yeah, if you're in enterprise software, go to Davos. I actually think it's worth the money. If you're like, Sam Altman was there, and he was, his first time there. There's a bunch of tech people that were there. There's like their first time. And so we were
Right.
all sitting around talking, like, yeah, sharing some of these observations. But, I was at this dinner and he's like, well, it's my first time at Davos. I used to always say in my startup advice, don't be the kind of company that goes to, don't be this sort of founder that goes to Davos. Um, but I actually think if you're B2B business, you should go, right? Like
Yeah.
that was the shallow
Discover its
outside view.
revolutionary potential, man.
That's right. No, but like it's business gets done there for sure. But is the world controlled there? Maybe it used to be, maybe it still is to an extent, but the sort of control is increasingly dystopian and just stopping the future. And
Right.
it's a shame because the professed reasons to do that are to give people better lives. And I do
Benefit humanity,
worry,
yeah.
yeah, I do worry that the actual outcome of people who claim to have that motivation is to actually deny people better lives in the long run.